Hello and welcome to Media Studies. I'm James Brown. Let's get right to it. Uh, this Peacock gang is so interesting in so many different ways. The NBC spent $100 million on one playoff game that wouldn't even air on NBC. It's airing on Peacock, the streaming network. Now that it's over, we got to ask the question: was it worth it? And for a few reasons, I think it is. It's complicated. Number one, Peacock isn't on the radar. It's not one of your top end streaming networks. It's not on the Max level. It's not on the Netflix level. It's not on YouTube's level. If you look at a breakdown of the most streamed channels, the places it's called the Dial. It's owned by Nielsen, where it breaks down where most people are spending their time when they do stream. Peacock does not get above 1%. I don't believe it's ever gotten above 1%. So Peacock is very, very secondary. It's not a top end platform. And if you want to change that, you need to do a few things. You need to prove that you're a place for premium content. I want to know that if I'm going to spend $6 a month on you, that it's something that I'm going to get my bang for the buck for, and that it's worth the investment. And one way to do that is to hold NFL fans hostage, because we'll pay for it. I paid for it. I signed up for a year for it because, well, the Bills were on and I wanted to watch. I haven't missed a Bills game in over a decade. So I am one of those people, one of those suckers that signed up for it, because that's just the way it rolls. That's just one step toward that. I'm a big believer that most Americans will pay for, at max, 4 or 5 TV subscriptions. And I think that's the high end. It's not the average. I think the average is probably going to end up around 3. I think we're going to end up with a lot of commercial based networks. So if you want to distinguish yourself, if you want to be one of those 3 to 5, you got to get yourself out in front of as many people as possible. And I think that's what happened. That's why you make that $100 million investment. Because if they don't know you exist, they're not going to subscribe. If I don't know you're there, which, believe it or not, a lot of people had no idea what Peacock was, you're not going to subscribe to something you don't know. So honestly, I could argue that this was just a giant ad for them. They got a massive amount of downloads. They got a massive amount of attention. They got all kinds of controversy. By the way, if you're that congressman who decided that, hey, I'm going to spend taxpayer money and time writing a letter demanding that games not be exclusively on Peacock, please get a life. We got inflation. We got war. We got so many other problems. Don't worry about sports. Leave that to us, who yammer on the internet. And at the same time, as I said earlier, you'll also gain subscriptions, and hopefully you'll retain some of them. There's always churn. There's always people who come in and out of subscriptions. That's just the nature of subscriptions. Having premium content lessens that. At least it's one way to do that. The downside of that is that most of those people who signed up will churn out, and they'll churn out quickly. The downside is that they're likely a month or so, or maybe a year, but that's how they are. That's how they roll. Also, it's $100 million. You can spend $100 million on a lot of other things. It's not that it, it It's a tough one because you would think that $100 million will go a long way, but in many ways in the entertainment business, $100 million doesn't go all that many places. It can easily just fade into oblivion. It's kind of like fairy dust in many points. When you get some numbers that are that high, it's just a matter of time where it just sort of like goes poof anyway. So w- it, and the other you really take with all this is that the the game ended up sucking. Kansas City kicked Miami's ass. But the thing about that is that's just a risk you take with sports. So having a high profile fight, having uh, a big match is just it's well worth your time, at least from that perspective. If I'm Comcast who owns NBC in Peacock, I am overjoyed. I got Pat Mahomes, I got Tyreek Hill, I got Travis Kelsey, I got Taylor Swift, and for a night, I was the belle of the ball for I don't know 8 to 10 million people who paid me $6 for at least a month. So I am overwhelmed. From the league's perspective, I think it's something that's even more interesting. They're they're looking at this as essentially the way they looked at cable games. For those who don't know, the NFL aired on USA Network. The NFL aired on TNT. The NFL airs right now on NFL Network in ESPN. All those are paid services. Uh, For those who complain, what's the difference? You could argue that all of these games should be free, but there never are and haven't been for at least 3 decades. And they really aren't now. I mean, this is something that they've been ramping up. I mean, over the last, I'd say at least 20 years, Thursday nights and Sunday nights and Monday Night Football, and not to mention NFL works in the Europe games, all to some degree have been behind paid services. I'll take back the Sunday Night Football bit because it has not been paid, but the other ones, all, all, all some degree behind a paywall. This is not new for the NFL. What is new is it's streaming instead of cable, which is the big piece here. I think the leagues know, and not just the NFL. I think the NBA, who has a new contract coming up where they're pushing get more broadcast games. They've already agreed an ad hoc agreement with ESPN to put Wednesday night games on ABC, at least in the short term. And they have expressed to media reporters, at least off the record, that they want more broadcasting, more games in front of more eyeballs. They don't want to be locked in cable land because cable land is shrinking. There's fewer and fewer and fewer people who actually pay for cable. So they don't want to be there. They don't want to be stuck. So they want to move on from that spot. So if you're the leagues, you look at this and you're like, hmm, okay, we want to get away from cable. We want to get on broadcasting. And then you look at the broadcasting landscape, and then you got to be scared about that too, because the jig seems to be up with the networks. Within the last year, we've seen heavy rumors and some direct statements from owners of the big four TV networks in America that they're up for sale or and that they're not highly profitable. We'll start with ABC. Disney and Bob Iger, the CEO, walked this back some, kinda, sorta, but It was massive news when Bob decided to say that even ABC was up for sale, that was looking for strategic investment, that he was going to consider unloading the legacy cable and broadcast network. Why? Because these are eroding properties, because we're all spending way too much time streaming, as you are when you are listening to me now. So this is clear. That's one of the league's partners. That's one of those potential areas where if you are the NFL and you're looking at future contracts, you're like, oh, ABC might not be there. It might not be. It might its ownership might be different. It might merge with another network. It might be sold to a vulture capital firm. There's a bunch of other outcomes there that you have to be aware of and afraid of if you're the NFL. So if you're thinking, that's kind of scary. At the same time, both companies who are both trying to get not out of the cable business, but kind of out of the cable business are merging some media operations because, like I said, cable sucks because, of course, streaming. And then, of course, there's CBS. CBS is owned by Paramount Global, which is on the verge of bankruptcy. There's a major payment that's due in March. We're not sure that Sherry Redstone, the controlling owner of Paramount Global, who owns CBS, can actually make this payment. Until we know that she could actually make this debt payment, it's quite possible that CBS goes bankrupt. At least their ownership group does. Now, if you're the NFL, these are two of your four main business partners, and they're both incredibly unstable. For now, NBC and Fox seem like they're on solid footing. But with those things just cropping up in the last year or so, you're like, who the hell knows what's going to happen next? That's one reason why the NFL is hell bent on proving that, hey, we can draw big numbers on streaming. That's one of the reasons why they moved Amazon to Thursday Night Football. I know also the networks weren't the networks, NBC, ABC, CBS, and Fox. They all wanted it, but they wanted it for much lower numbers because they felt like paying $1 billion a year for it was not worth the bang for the buck. That's partly why they cut the deal with YouTube and Sunday Ticket, Direct TV. Once again, a pay for service that held exclusive NFL games. Um, they were not making money on Sunday Ticket and had not been making money for Sunday Ticket for a very long time. So if that's one of the reasons why YouTube took over that deal, because they're like, hey, we're trying to build our audience. You're just trying to stay in business. So we think it's worth it to overpay for this product. And of course, this Peacock deal. So if you're the NFL, you're trying to protect yourself. You're trying to develop the next generation of NFL products owners. You want your business partners to continue to increase revenue over the years. And if you do not, and I mean, if you do not get more and more investors, if you don't, if after NBC and Fox and CBS and ABC sort of fade into the background when they're not as powerful, when things get much worse over the next 10 years, and I do think they're going to be worse for all of these networks over the next decade. After those deals up, you want someone who's going to pay you a larger paycheck for those deals. It's not going to be the networks. So if you're the NFL, that's why you're experimenting with Peacock. You want to prove something.